Okay, so this NDI is basically an extension from what we were doing in class yesterday. So are the triangles congruent, and if so, by what statement? So if we look at what we have an angle here, and we have an angle here congruent to a corresponding angle here. We have a side and a corresponding side here, and then we have another angle and another angle here. Now, because the sides are not in between the two angles, we can say that this is congruent by angle, angle, side. Okay, in this one, we can use the reflexive property to say that DB is congruent to DB, so we would have this third side right here. So we have side and a second side here and here, and then a third side, and this side is in both the triangles, so this would be side, side, side. That's just checking your homework. All right, getting started with the transversal. So our learning goal is basically to identify pairs of angles when a transversal cuts lines. If you guys remember back to 8th grade, I know that was a long time ago, but in 8th grade, one of the books dealt with transversals and parallel lines and what happens with the relationships between the angles. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. And then these are the different kinds of relationships we're going to be talking about. Same side interior, corresponding, alternate interior, and alternate exterior. Okay, so a transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines. So if we look up here, we have a line right here, and we have a line right here, and this line would be our transversal. Okay, these two yellow lines can't be the transversal because they only intersect one line each. This one has to be the transversal because it intersects two lines. Okay, so alternate exterior angles. So alternate would mean kind of like opposite, and exterior means on the outside. So alternate exterior angles, one example would be angle 5 and angle 8. Okay, so angle 5 and angle 8 would be alternate exterior angles. Another set of alternate exterior angles would be angle 7 and angle 6. So they're on opposite sides, on opposite ends, and they're on the outside of the parallel lines. So hence the alternate and the exterior. So exterior of the parallel lines and alternate, so opposite from each other, kind of like catty corner. All right, alternate interior angles. We would have two pairs of those. The first pair would be angle 1 and angle 2, and that's similar to alternate exterior angles, except this time interior means on the inside of the parallel lines. Okay, so 1 and 2, and so then by process of elimination, you could assume that 3 and 4 are also your alternate interior angles. Same side interior angles would be, same side means on the same side of the transversal, and interior means on the inside of the parallel lines. So same side, interior, so they're on the same side of the transversal and they're inside the parallel lines. So 1 and 4 would be same side interior, and 3 and 2 would be same side interior. All right, corresponding angles would be, if you can imagine, taking this group of angles right here and setting them on top of this group of angles here. So if we were to take all 4 of these and just slide it down here, which ones would these line up with? Well, if we look at 5, 5 would line up with 4. Whoops, sorry. Well, 1 would line up with 7. 5 would line up with 4. 6 would match up with 2, and 3 would match up with 8. Okay, so corresponding angles is kind of like thinking about this group here on one parallel line, or on one line, and then this group here on the other line, and which ones they match with from top to bottom. All right, and then vertical angles we've talked about already, so it might help if cover up this one. So if you just look at this top line with the transversal, our vertical angles would be 1 and 6 and 3 and 5. And then if we were to slide this one up, okay, because remember your vertical angles come from two intersecting lines and they have to be non-adjacent, so they can't be touching each other. So you would have 4 and 8 and 2 and 7. Okay, so those are all the different kinds of relationships you would have from two lines being cut by a transversal. Okay, so angle 7 and angle 3. So here's angle 7, here's angle 3. So we have to label this. Are they alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, or same side interior? This one's a little bit tricky because it's got 3 lines now instead of just 2. They can't be alternate interior because they're not both on the inside of the 2 lines. So interior would mean that they have to be on the inside of the 2 lines that are cut by the same transversal. So they're not interior. They're also not exterior because they're not both on the outside, and they can't be alternate because they're not on opposite sides of the transversal. They can't be same side interior because this one's not on the inside of that line. So they would have to be corresponding. So if you think about taking this set of angles and moving them down on top of this set of angles, 3 would match up with 7. So these are corresponding. Okay. Then we have 8 and 2. So if it helps, what you can always do is just ignore this other line that's down here. Let's see if we can get that out of our way. Oops. There we go. All right. So we have 8 and we have 2. These 2 are on the outside of these lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So that means that they would be alternate exterior angles. And I'm just going to abbreviate alt-ext angles. Okay, get this guy out of the way for a little bit. And again, if you need to, what you could do is think about covering up this set of angles now, because we're talking about 4 and 11. Okay, so 4 and 11, again, if these are the 2 lines that we're talking about here, they're not both interior and they're not both exterior. And they're also not on opposite sides of the transversal. So we can automatically eliminate alternate interior, we can eliminate alternate exterior, and we can eliminate same side interior because they're not both on the inside of these 2 lines. So that means that they would have to be corresponding as well. Okay. Next pair that we're looking at is 7 and 1. So again, I'm going to slide this down here so that we can just focus on these 2 lines right here. So now we have 7 and 1. Okay? These are the 2 lines that we're talking about, and here's our transversal. So 7 and 1 are on opposite sides of the transversal, so it's going to be alternate something. They're not both on the inside of these 2 lines, but they are both on the outside, so we could say that these are alternate exterior angles. Okay, 3 and 9. So 3 is here, 9 is here. And this line, we're talking about lines A and C. So they are on opposite sides of the transversal, so we know it's going to be alternate. They're both on the inside of these lines, so it would be alternate interior angles. and then the last two that we're talking about are 7 and 10. So 7 and 10, okay? So 7 and 10, we're talking about these two lines right here. Now these are not on opposite sides of the transversal, but they are both inside the pair of those two lines. So we're talking about same side interior angles. Same side interior angles. Okay. So we should see, when we're looking at this drawing, what we should have is we should have two lines that are not parallel to each other and a transversal. So grab your transversal and just kind of slide it back and forth and see what happens to those angles. Okay. So what's happening to these angles is that those angles are not staying consistent. They're not staying congruent. And we could take a protractor and measure them, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. You'll just have to take my word for it. Okay? So these angles are changing, okay, as that transversal moves. However, when we come over here and we move this parallel line, or we move this transversal back and forth between the two parallel lines, and you'll notice that they're parallel because they've got the markings on them showing that they're parallel. What happens is these lines are staying exactly the same, or these angles are staying exactly the same. So angle 1 is the same every single time. Angle 2 is the same every single time. Okay? So again, I'm not going to measure these angles, but what you should notice is that these two angles right here add to 180. These two angles here add to 180. These two angles here add to 180. These two angles here add to 180. And that makes sense because they're all lying along a straight line. They're straight angles, so they have to add up to 180 degrees. So just for the sake of going through this quickly, okay, I'm just going to put some measurements up here. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is, we'll say 70 degrees. This is 110 degrees, 110 degrees. 110, whoops, I'm sorry, that's not 110, that's 70. Again, 70 degrees, 110 degrees, 110 degrees, and 70 degrees. So if you notice, okay, we've talked about some different kinds of angles. So we have alternate exterior angles, we have alternate interior angles. We have same side interior angles. We have corresponding angles. And we also have vertical angles. Okay? So if we look at our alternate exterior angles, okay, that would be like angles 1 and angle 7, angle 2 and angle 8. So what can we say about pairs of alternate exterior angles? Alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay? If we look at corresponding angles, okay, corresponding angles would be like angle 2 and angle 6, angle 4 and angle 8. So what do you notice about those angles? Corresponding angles are also congruent. Ooh, that was not what I wanted to do. I guess we'll just keep going. All right, so alternate interior angles, okay, would be like 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. So these two would go together and these two would go together, okay? So we can also say the alternate interior angles are congruent. And we've already talked about vertical angles. So vertical angles would be like 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, 5 and 7, 6 and 8. And we know that vertical angles are also congruent. So really the only one that we have left to talk about is same side interior. So if we look at the same side interior, that would be these two angles right here and these two angles right here. And we notice here, these angles add to 180 degrees. All right, so your homework today is page 89, number 6. Good luck. If you have questions, send me an email.